Okay, video is starting. Get me adjusted here. Listen, hello everybody from Parenting Your Child in Recovery. I just wanted to jump on real fast. This is an unscheduled live, so if you happen to be listening, great. Um, I titled this thing, you know, JFK Jr. said what? And if any of you don't know, JFK Jr. Runs the Health and Human Services division of the government these days, and normally I wouldn't even comment on something like this, but I wanted to because and I'm not going to make any political statements whatsoever. But I would say this: I haven't been the greatest fan of the things that JFK Jr. has put forth, and not so much because I totally disagree with him, but because some of the things he's talking about and he's made his cornerstones, I don't know that much about really. Even though I've been a nurse for 40 years, the the main thing that I hear about is the immunizations and things of that nature. That they're against. And I don't know that much about those things to talk about them, but I do know a little bit about addiction treatment, and that's sort of what our site talks about. So I want to talk about two things. First of all, some of the things that he said, the changes that the government, needs to make or wants to make, and my ideas on that, and maybe some alternatives or add-ons. I won't say alternatives, I'll say add-ons. So JFK Jr. controversial, brought in by President Trump in order to change the health. He made it clear he had some extremely biased ideas about how health in this country is. Safety of our food products, addiction treatments also being included in that, making clear that he himself is in recovery. I think over 40 years he states he's in recovery, and that's one thing or another. But what he did was he proposed some new ideas in the administration or the federal attitude towards addiction. So I want to go over some of those and talk about them in light of what we're talking about, because my focus is parenting your child in recovery. So that means what parents and mentors are doing when they're leading young adults into the recovery arena. So the first thing I want to talk about that he brought up, because let's say I'm going to look at about five major points anyway they want to get to. The first thing is he wants to initiate things called healing farms, or I guess wilderness farms and retreats. He wants to bring the retreat model back. I can't say I disagree or agree with that. I'm a firm believer that, it's not the model, but how it's applied. But I can see doing that. I think right now our system has went way too much into just the medical, way too much in what insurance dictates. So anything that moves into those other areas and offers the other opportunities, I think, it's not too good. But the healing farms, you call them wellness farms. From what I read, and some of the critics that are saying that was tried in the 20s and 30s and didn't work. Well, I'd like to read up more on that. And if I do read up on that, I'm going to bring that to you here. We'll talk about that one day. I want to talk about that, though, because I'm not so 100% sure on that one. But he wants to bring back what he calls healing farms and put more of an emphasis on, natural settings, group settings, more supportive settings in order to work with addiction. Okay, that's one type. We won't, he wants to be more faith-based, and I don't have a big problem with that. I don't get up on the table and stand up for any type of, whether it's faith-based or not. It's not particularly my thing, but I don't have anything against it either. And I know a lot of people that are in my group or in groups that I am are, entrenched in the faith-based attitude, and I can work with that. I can work with that. The methods that I use work with that too. So not a problem, not anything that's a big problem. But he wants to start giving funding and have the faith-based organizations available or allowed to, or make more available to those groups federal funding. And see how he can do that and get the faith-based organizations to join in the federal fight against addiction. I will give JFK credit for one thing. He's bringing it up and he's talking about it, and he's talking about mixing it up. And heaven knows, in my faith-based attitude, heaven knows that it needs shaking up and it needs change. So I'm okay with him introducing something like that. That's okay. Tough love. Something to be said for it. I think all of us at one time have said things like, they're just letting people do too much. We're not going to get into that. But he wants to bring more tougher attitudes towards treatment and people instead of the harm reduction model. He wants more treatment. I think he's talking about federal employees, maybe, who are, caught and previously, as soon as they're caught with types of, a drug problem, they're immediately offered the treatment. I think he's looking toward forcing certain types of treatment, or basically saying, baby, it's our way or the highway. I'm going to have to dig a little bit more deep into that. But tough love, and I can see with the current tone and tenor of the administration, I can see where they would want to throw in a tough love aspect to it. Even if they didn't think it would totally work, they do want to have that attitude and that persona, you might say, about it. So, and I can see that. It makes sense to me. Not a problem. I sort of understand that. I can't say that I agree, and I can't say I think it would be helpful. I must say that. But if it's part of the overall strategy, I'm not going to, bring my weapons to battle on that either. So, quick drink. But I can understand that. It makes sense. This one is zero housing first. I didn't really know much about this, but basically what the federal approach has been is to secure housing immediately, regardless of the situation, and then worry about treatment later, if I'm seeing that right, at least in some instances, and at least that is the current administration's viewpoint on what's happening. I'm sure there's plenty of debate to be had about that, but that's what they want to do, and they want to curve those things back and, have certain restrictions or obligations attached to those housing payments, and those obligations, I'm sure, are certain type enrolling or being involved in a certain type of treatment models. Okay. Another thing they want to bring about and think that it would help. Again, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with any of this right now. This was reading it, he said these things, and that's the approach they want to make. And I only applauded them for the fact that they want to address it and make some changes. I'm not going to, fight with them about what changes they're making. I just want somebody to get in the arena and make some changes. I've got plenty of ideas myself, but they're not listening to me. So, and the last thing, they want to put $100 million in something they call streets. And if I'm looking at my acronym correctly, it's safety through recovery, engagement, and evidence-based treatments and support systems. So I guess that comes out to be streets when you dial it back. Part of that makes sense to me in reading through, what they want to do. I want to get a little bit more interested into, and I hope you do too, as me just bringing this up. I think that in this community, when we're talking about recovery, even the people who, and I don't agree with the ones here. If you are here and you only agree staunchly in one way and fight other ways, I'm not sure I agree with you, because to me, addiction treatment is an and. Not only, but an and. I think multiple approaches and mindsets should be melded together to customize what's proper for that individual that you're working with. So let me just break into a real generalized thought of what, if I was sitting there with JFK, I would just mention some things to him. Not so much policy initiatives, but, the things that I think they should start to think about. Okay, first of all, I sort of put it in about five and a half categories. I say five and a half, but because the first thing is patient fortification is what I call it. And in my mind, pretty much everything JFK is talking about and what most of our treatments are about, treatments with the quote signs, treatments, uh, or what I call patient fortifications. And that means that these are things that are programs, thought processes, activities, modalities, all introduced to assist in helping an individual in an addictive situation. And I'm sure in my mind that means recovery, and that mind means not just drug and alcohol, although majorly drug and alcohol because of the environment we find ourselves in. I also throw in correctional recidivism in there and things of that nature, especially for young people. But those are just the modalities and the things that people help, and throw into that the helpers, include myself in that, but just the physicians, counselors, therapists, everybody helps, volunteers, all the helpers, all that lumps into patient fortification. Everybody, things, assets, people that want to help join in and help in the fight of an individual's addiction. So, you take a look at those, what I call patient fortifications, and you line them up and get those in order. Okay. Once you get those in order, and you make a choice of one or more of those things, whatever mindset you fall into, because right now I can't really delineate what you're going to fall into, but you put those together and you lay them aside and take a look at what you got. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Let's move on. Okay, now, to me, second on top of that, and I think this is key, clarification. Get an idea on a number of things. One thing is, if you plan on using any of these fortifications, specifically, let's talk about a drug and alcohol facility for a young person. Let's just use that in this example. Clarification to me means understanding innately what that organization does, what they'll do for you, what they plan on do for you, what are their rules of engagement, what do they offer you, what are your rights, what knowledge do they have that should be passed on to you. I am offering a 101 vital questions you need to ask any facility, correct? Addiction facility you're sending your young person to, 101 questions, the answers of which you need to know. I'd be happy to send it to anybody and talk about it. And some of my future videos are going to be sort of zeroing on those questions, because your knowledge base does even more than just knowing those things, the value of those answers. But it also shows commitment to yourself and to the young adult that you're working with. And it shows a different kind of commitment, not a judgmental commitment, but a commitment that you're in it, you're in the foxhole, you're willing to learn, you're willing to understand, you're willing to be ready to back up, you know the rules, you know who to talk to, you have the administrator's contact information, you know how to get in touch with the physicians or the nurses stations, you know what their rules of engagement are exactly, okay? You know what they are promising you as far as service goes. You know everything about what you're dealing with, and you're not just driving them up to the door saying, oh gosh, we hope that something happens. No, you're digging in, but you're not digging in a nosy way. You're not digging in a judgmental way, and you're leaving the actual treatment to the people that you are paying to, that you feel are the professionals you've chosen. But at the same time, you're letting them know, them and your young adult, that you're in it for serious. You're in it for the knowledge of it. You want to know who to call for what. You want to know how they operate. You want to know what the ins and outs of the very subtle things that they do. Housing, monitoring, breaks, assistance, ancillary programs, the different types of permissions that you need. You want them to know that, you are involved that way. Now, and to me, that's clarification. Okay, so once you get your assets together, decide which ones you're going to use, you clarify yourself on that asset or those assets, whether that be, people or everything. And he asks that you clarify, you get your knowledge in the best you can. Okay, thirdly, and I think this is huge, and this is the one that I get ignored on all the time, but I don't care because this is what I believe people need. Outcome mindset. Dealing with addiction or behavioral problems requires a strong outcome mindset, meaning where is the plan for this to end up? Specifically, what is the plan? A death rattle, the death rattle that destroys and brings the rate of success way down is no real plan. And I don't mean a plan for action. I mean a plan for where you're going to arrive. Deal with the action later. Where are you going to arrive? Where are you going to be? And understand like you can just touch it. It's almost like a vision board. You can touch it. You know what it smells like. You know what it looks like. You know what it tastes like. You know what it feels like. The positive, the negative, all of it. You put yourself there in that outcome mindset. And that's what you fix your mind at. A lot of these programs and people that I talk to is where I separate from a lot of practitioners and mindsets is, we want to be careful how much we put on them or how much we tell them to suffer because relapse is such a real possibility. And it would, my thing is this, of course relapse is a possibility, but that's not the point. The point is to get in a situation where you don't need to worry about that. And if you're thinking about anything else other than that, then it doesn't really matter what your mindset is. If you're not recovering and you're not heading toward that place in your outcome mindset, then you're still at risk for grave harm and death. So why dilly-dally around with it? Go all out, swing for the fences, swing hard, dive into second base, head first, and get it done. And I believe strongly in that. There's no need to pussyfoot around, to use a term, and hedge on, it's going to be so hard. I don't know very many things that aren't hard anymore. But saving your young adult's life, how hard can that be? How hard can it be? So let's think about that. So the outcome mindset, a clear, specific ending. Can that change and evolve? Yes, but start with one. Okay? Because that's the only way you're going to end with one. I'm going to say it again. You need to start with a very specific outcome, and that is the only way you can end with a specific outcome. So that's one of the cornerstones of this I hope you get. Okay, next is a self-generated system. Now, I use a quick analogy with this self-generated system, and the next few things I say are more in an analogy form. But for me, a self-generated system is the vehicle that you're going to use, your young adult's going to use to get there. Now, the thing about a self-generated system is a lot of our patient fortification assets would have you believe that they have the exact system for you. I believe that a system can be, and maybe should be taken from the thoughts and ideas that you get from your assets, but it has to be customized. If it's not customized, it will not stand the forces that will come up against it if it is not customized, if it's not true, if it does not honor that person's mindset, their level of perspective, their potential for growth. If it does not include all of those things, then it's not going to work out. It's just not. And this is another reason why success rate is, I don't like to use numbers, but it's low. I've been here for 40 years doing this. Success rate's low with young people first time. And a lot of times this only success rate that we do get out of these programs is going to be, it was a natural success rate. A natural success rate to me means that once an individual, a young person is introduced to the forum of recovery, they don't want no more of it. The pride that they have in themselves bestowed upon them and in their family, the fear of what a future looks like, straightens them around and they grab a hold and then gravitate toward the toward the assets or the fortifications that are involved, and you need to make a way. And I think that a certain percentage of people fall under that category. And I don't think it was so much the treatments per se, but the opportunity for treatment. Okay, and some people, the opportunity for treatment is good. So this self-generated system for me is the vehicle. This is what they're going to use to drive to that destination, that outcome mindset, that destination. Okay. The second thing is, got a vehicle, got to be powered by an engine. That engine for me is what I call perpetual power. In other words, what assets, how do we combine the assets, okay, and the generated system, and make it so that that can continually press on through the bad road, through bad weather, through potholes, through this, that, and the other, through traffic, through all the adversarial things that it's going to run into. How does it continue to motor on? Okay, how does it continue to go? How do we build that engine? I think that's very important, to build something that is able to continually take everything that we're giving it, use it, and digest it. The fuel, last part to me, is accountability. Accountability is something, because I think accountability to me entails all the fuel that we use to power that engine, to drive that self-generated system vehicle. Okay? Accountability is a mix of pain, status, love, concern, and that starts with the individual, the individual's self-worth. These are things that can be, if they are in poor repair, then we can use those fortification assets and build those up, because all of these things are learnable. Okay, they're learnable, which means teachable. Okay, teachable, learnable, and there is always room for growth. So whatever system, whatever mindset that you're bringing to that to that situation can be improved on, and that is a very important point, because remember, when you head toward that outcome mindset, there's going to be changes, and hopefully one of the biggest changes, is the self-esteem level and the mindset level. That's what we're trying to change, that awareness of who and what you are, and that, along with teaching, a remembrance. I'm one of those people that believe that there is an innate understanding of who you are through all the storm, through the this, that, or the other, the bad things. There's an innate understanding, and once we can bring that to light, that will help. So, with that pain and that status, that brings on accountability, how it relates to the human component. Okay. Now, the thing about the human component is, when I talk about accountability, it can be positive. There's negative aspects to accountability too. All the people that you run into, loved ones, foes, the disinterested, the interested, not everybody will be for you. And some that say they're for you will not be for you, and some that say they're against you will be for you, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But it's the truth, because when you're dealing in that the human aspect of accountability, it's extremely strong and an extremely important element in this recovery. And that's what makes it so positive and also so dangerous. So accountability, how it's wielded, how it's used, okay, and that is really specific to how the self-generated system operates for the use of accountability, okay. That vehicle needs that fuel to power that engine, the perpetual engine. So sort of an analogy of how I think that goes, and that's why I sit down there and talk to JFK Jr. about that, talk about how he, because he wants to, in my mind, he wants to manipulate the fortification systems. But I think that he should think about how we can add in some other transformational mindsets, okay? and accountability, not just the people, but the system, which a system is an amalgamation of the people. But the system also shows some accountability. So for so long, the system has had, in my mind, no real accountability. The system has given people an opportunity to heal, some suggestions on how to heal, you know. But I don't think it's taken accountability for what value it needs to give, especially in terms of, for some, in terms of finance, in terms of commitment. You know, we've laid down and assumed that we are going to be overtaken by it. So the few that we help, they should be grateful. I think we should take a stronger stance as a nation. And I tell JFK that too. We take a stronger stance as a nation on that, you know. So I can see where some of the things he's talking about, you know, there, but that's what I would say to him. So this was a short live, and I hope that some people, you know, watch it in the replays and sort of see what I'm talking about. As of today, I don't know when you'll see this in the replay, but 19th at 7 p.m. I'll be on LinkedIn Live, sort of bringing some of this to light to some of the practitioners and my idea of how they should start really digging into this mindset and using what I like to call transformational referrals, people who are willing to dig in deeper than they are because of circumstances, training, know-how, knowledge, experience, and add on to what they said. This is an and thing, A-N-D, not one or the other. It's an and thing. We're putting together power, we're putting together strengths in order to defeat a tough foe, a very tough foe, a foe that is well practiced, a foe that is well funded, okay, a foe that has experience, determination, drive, and a mission. And that foe has an outcome mindset. So while some of us are dilly-dallying around, not coming into this situation with a specific outcome mindset, the foe has an outcome mindset, okay? And whether that foe is spiritual in your estimation, whether it is organizational, whether it is systemic, however you want to describe that foe, the foe has an ultimate outcome mindset. You don't have to worry about that. So hopefully I get to see you there, and hopefully I get to see you soon with a live. I'll try to come on later on this week and really start to, I want to dig a little bit deeper into what JFK said and bring that to pass and really relate it to what we as a group, you know, the ones who are parenting young adults, I want to bring it into, you know, our focus, and we'll see what we get after that. So thank you for spending a little time with me, and hope to see you soon.